Leah, maybe we could like post it or something after. I had a few people wanting to see the tree plan who couldn't make it tonight, so I was going to send out the recording to a bunch of people, but maybe we could post it on social media somehow.
They usually post it on YouTube, and then we can share the link.
Nice.
Yeah, and we can also put up the audio recording right after the meeting, or at least at some point tonight, okay?
Okay, great. Yeah, no rush.
Okay,
Thank you guys. Oh, are we recording? Awesome. Can we please do roll call when you're ready?
Yeah, Angela,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Drix is absent. Catherine Van Amberg,
Present.
Carlos Garcia Quijano,
Here.
Jesus Holguin is absent. Amelia Rose
Here.
and Vedic Kumba.
Present.
So we have 5 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge Priscilla De La Cruz, who we've nominated to be a task force member, is with us as well. And we're just awaiting her confirmation. Awesome. Well, we have a pretty packed agenda today, so let's get going. The first thing on the agenda is updates on projects from the Office of Sustainability. So I'll turn it over to Leah and Emily.
Great, thank you. So first, I just wanted to take a minute to introduce our new Director of Public Property. She's here with us as a participant. So perhaps Donna or Angela, if you could make Brenda Almonte a attendee for a minute so she can say hello and you can all get to know her. So as the Director of Public Property, Brenda is responsible for managing our buildings. We do a lot of work with public property on energy efficiency. And we had an interim director for a number of months, and we're excited to welcome Brenda. So Brenda, I'll let you introduce yourself. Feel free to be quick. It's just wanted to give you a chance to say hi.
Hi all, Brenda Almonte here. So this is literally, I've been here for a week. And I just spoke with Leah last week and really just wanted, just so you know my face, know who I am, and if you need anything, always, let me know. I heard of some of the work that you're doing, and I just think it's really amazing. I won't be staying for the whole meeting, but I just, wanted to say hello.
Thanks for being here, Brenda. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the City of Providence.
Thank you.
All right. So if you I'll try to be quick on the updates, a couple staffing updates. We are in the process of reviewing resumes for the energy manager position. We got some great applicants. Really excited to see that move forward. We also were able to proceed with an artist in residency being put in our office. So we had started this process back before COVID and had selected an artist to work with, but COVID sort of put everything on pause for a while, and we got approval, however, a week or 2 weeks ago from the Finance Committee to move forward with that work. So we're really excited about that. She will be, I'll probably bring her to the task force at a future meeting to talk more specifically about the work, but broadly speaking, she will be responsible for creating art and that is around an engagement tool, specifically around the Port of Providence and the Green Justice Zone down there. We're really excited to have her join our efforts. Just quick, speaking of the budget and positions, you may have heard the City Council at the Finance Committee meeting a week or two ago. They proposed basically eliminating funding for all vacant positions, or all positions that are currently vacant in the city. This would certainly be a challenge to our department as we have 2 vacancies right now. They are, at least for our perspective, the city's perspective, both the energy manager and the climate justice policy associate position, even though it's grant funded, it still could be affected, but we are committed to ensuring that these positions, along with many other positions that are really important but happen to be vacant because of the hiring freeze that we've been under, since the beginning of COVID. The city is committed to working with the council and finding a compromise with the understanding that, yes, we are in very challenging financial times, but some of these staff positions are really essential to important work and community services that the city is obliged to provide. So just kind of putting that out there as a heads up, but no, there's not a definitive understanding yet how that will play out. I think the Finance Committee is meeting again on Thursday. Community choice aggregation, more exciting developments on that front. So what we were informed a couple weeks ago that there's a challenge with the program, a potential challenge with the program, how it serves those who are on the low income rate with National Grid. And essentially the issue is that if you are right now, if you're with National Grid as your supplier and you're a low income, you have a low income rate, you qualify for the low income discount essentially on your energy bills. You also then qualify for an arrears management program with National Grid. So if you fall behind on your energy bills, they have a process by which to help you pay back your arrears and eventually eliminate your debt. It's a small safety net, but it's certainly one that we would not want to see our program take away. And if you're on third-party supply, you don't have access to that arrears management program. The PUC is working on a program called Purchase or Receivable, POR is the acronym, that would make it so if you were with a third-party supplier and you fell behind, you could be put back onto National Grid and your arrears would go to National Grid. If you're on third-party supply and you fall back on your energy bills now, often as a small residential account, it's not really clear what would happen, but in theory, a supplier could send like collection agencies after you to recoup that payment. That's something we don't want. And so we're looking at ways, while the PUC hopefully moves towards this POR program that solves this problem entirely, we certainly don't want to be signing up folks for a program that takes away some of that security for low-income residents. So we're going to be engaging when we go out to bid with suppliers and hopefully working towards a solution where the suppliers are offering their own sort of arrears management program for low-income residents. So it's a way to kind of bake it into the structure of the program, where if you're a low income on the low income rate and you fall behind, there will be like basically a pool of funding that's supported by the rest of the program that will help you manage those arrears. So this is a sort of evolving issue. We're still kind of trying to figure out how and if this will work, but certainly welcome more conversation. This is something we want to talk to. We're going to reach out to George Wiley Center and the ambassadors who helped create provide a lot of input in the development of the program initially to make sure that the solutions that we come up with are truly equitable, especially for low income rate members. So that's a kind of complicated situation. I'll pause there in case there are questions. But like I said, it's a kind of emerging issue that we're working to address.
Any questions from any task force members?
No questions. I'll just say, Leah, great job explaining something that sounds really complicated. And I appreciate the innovative solution towards addressing it and involving the George Wiley Center and the advisors. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to have a follow-up conversation or has thoughts on that, feel free to reach out, or I encourage you to do so. And then I will turn it over to Emily to talk a bit about the plastic bag policy.
Yeah, hi everyone. The plastic Bag Ban, Providence's plastic bag ban has been in place for 1 year. Last Thursday was October 22nd, the 1 year. So we put out a notice, kind of an email to as many business contacts as we could compile, which was licensing, had a list of all active business licenses. They've been conducting business by email and not mail lately. So that made it a little bit easier for us. And then we merged that list of like 2,500 with our small business office also has a running list of businesses that didn't actually overlap very much with licensing list. So we got an email out to about 4,500 email contacts. So hopefully a lot of people heard about and were reminded of the plastic bag ban last week at the 1 year anniversary. And the key messages, I noticed we don't have chat. I would love to share the link to that newsletter in English and Spanish. We'll probably push it out on our social or at least post it on our website in the next few days. Essentially, just re-communicating what's allowed, what's not allowed, and the communication about that, like thicker plastic bags are not allowed. The fact that because 1 year has passed, exemptions on the basis of excess inventory will no longer be permitted. And that means that we are advancing to enforcement and will begin issuing warnings to retailers that are not in compliance. We're in the process of procuring a handheld ticketing device, the same kind that DPW uses. We discussed, but said we don't have the budget or the capacity to do physical mailers of the same communication. But I'm working with our small business coordinator to do additional outreach to business and neighborhood associations, elected officials, also hopefully mapping out some like visits that I'll do to key business corridors to just drop off that communication with basic information about the plastic bag ban as well, just to continue that kind of like getting the word out in education through the end of the year at least. In these conversations with our small business coordinator and our community relations team, we're really honing in on how we can help with negotiating a better price on recyclable paper and reusable bags, which is an idea we've had all year, but just haven't had the bandwidth to do. So we are actually advancing with purchasing our ability and the logistics of the city, negotiating prices with a few suppliers that would then have a lower price for that retailers could opt into, and the more people that opted in, the lower the price would be. So we're hoping that's something we'll be able to offer as a support as retailers make this transition. I mentioned the enforcement and the fact that we're going to procure a machine, likely using the funds from the exemption requests that were received over the past year. And then the final piece, which I'm excited about, is where we've talked with Amelia and Groundwork about how their green team can support on the ground outreach and specifically do more outreach to customers just around the city. And this also kind of ties into how you can help as a task force member and member of the public. So we think that the main messages that we want to get out to the general public is, hey, don't forget to bring your own bag, like not just to the grocery store, but like to the pharmacy and to the corner store and so on. And also in a kind way to like, hey, let us know if you see plastic around town so that we can be in touch and we can help everyone make this transition away from single-use plastic bags. And the way that you can get in touch is our email, sustainpvd@providenceri.gov, as well as just my email directly, as well as the PVD 311. So folks can call 311 when they're in Providence. There's also an app, PVD 311. So those are two. Yeah, I think that was a deep dive into all that's going on with the plastic bag ban.
Right, and Emily, you had said that there were things you would have put in the chat. If you want to email them to me, I can email them to the whole task force and then our stakeholder list, if that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Emily. I'll just note that Emily has taken this work on has done an excellent job being very thorough, especially in the engagement with small businesses and making sure folks are aware of the policy and that we're finding creative ways to support them in the transition, especially amongst all sorts of challenges that small businesses are dealing right now with really with regards to COVID. We're trying to avoid, we're trying to be supportive in our enforcement and avoid as much as possible, punitive measures with businesses across the board. And if you have any sort of ideas on how we can expand on these efforts, please let us know. Or if you hear from small businesses, happen to get some anecdotal information about this transition, we would love to hear that as well. So those are kind of the big updates. I would also note that the metrics group started meeting. I don't know, Emily, if you want to say anything specific about that?
Yeah, Amelia and I met a few weeks back, and I think that we were thinking of maybe having Sue, Catherine, and there's someone else that Priscilla who may have an interest in also joining. I was going to reach out to you all and Amelia especially about maybe rescheduling our election day meeting, which was unintentional, in case we all have intense election day plans. So I will hopefully reach out in the next few days to change that particular date, and would be happy to share all the dates with Sue again if anyone wants to join. So far, Susanna decided to step back for that particular series of meetings. So Amelia and I would love to have more folks to kind of discuss, and we are just keeping the commitment to the 1 hour meetings that we've scheduled, and there won't be work in between. So that's an appeal.
Yeah,
Thanks, Emily.
I'm in. I would welcome the rescheduling of the November 3rd hour meeting.
My reaction to the first meeting with Emily was, oh, that's it? It didn't seem like that much. No, that's another incentive for everybody.
Thank you. I think those are the big updates, and would love to take any questions or comments from task force members. I don't know, Sue, if you want to save questions from the public for the end, or however you want to do that, that's fine by me.
Yeah, do any task force members have any questions or comments for Emily? Okay. Yeah, Emily, so if you send those dates around, I can include that all in an email to the members, and we can get, I know I'm looking forward to participating. I wasn't able to do the first one, but I'm excited about the metric subgroup, so I'll plan to join the next. Awesome, so let's, and it actually doesn't look like anyone has their hand raised from public anyway. Great, I think we're all excited about this presentation. So let's jump into that, and I will invite Candace, Carrie, and Doug to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their work. Thank you guys for being here so much. I've been really looking forward to this.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Sue, and everyone for having us. Psyched to talk to y'all about the tree plan. I am the executive director of the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program, PNPP, less of a mouthful. Yeah, Doug, want to introduce yourself?
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the city forester, and our division manages all of the publicly owned trees in Providence, the street trees, park trees, schools. And but we're also, I work closely with Cassie and Candace as the public side of the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program.
Hi, I'm Candace Pounding, the program coordinator for PNPP. Happy to be here.
So
thank you all so much for being here. Go ahead.
So we have a little slide presentation, and it looks like I do have sharing capabilities. So let me go ahead and get that. Oh no, I do not. Do I? Or can I be given slide sharing capabilities?
Angela or Donna, is that possible to give Cassie that ability?
She wants to share.
Yeah, she's a presentation.
Yeah, I think she can, Angela.
That's what I'm doing now.
And as a reminder to task force members, we've been talking a lot about the equity of green space on the have been kind of leading up to this conversation for the last few weeks. So really grateful for them to be here with us.
There we go. Okay. Let's see. I can figure out.
Awesome.
All right, can you guys see that? Yay. So PVD tree plan. Let's see, we thought it would be useful to start by giving a very just quick summary highlight of what this project is so far as we've conceived it, and then talk a little bit about just kind of how we do things now in the current sort of lay of the land snapshot about our urban forest work and what led us to realizing we needed this PVD tree plan. And so really what the big picture, and we'll come back to all of this, but is a high level vision and a roadmap for all of us as stakeholders in the city, residents, people who plant trees, people who sit under trees, climb trees, water trees, to work together to figure out how we build the equitable urban forest that we know we all deserve. And so we will be working to combine some really nerdy data analysis, a lot of dialogue and conversation among different groups of people, a lot of listening and listening. And we're hoping to create a vision, but also a real action plan and some real strategies for how we fund those actions for building an equitable, robust urban forest. So that's the big picture. A little snapshot of just what we have here in Providence currently. We, as you all know, a lot of this, but we're really lucky that we have a forestry division. Not every city does have a city's forester, let alone one as totally awesome as Doug's. So we're incredibly fortunate that we have a division of the Parks Department and a bunch of staff who are responsible for maintaining our public right-of-way and public property trees. We have a few ways that we plant trees in the city. Right now, the main mechanism for planting trees on public property and right-of-way trees is through the PNPP street tree plantings, which is the program that I collaborate with Doug on and Candace and residents around the city. That's a sort of community-driven, resident-driven neighborhood plantings, but just for street trees. And we have a lot of trees get planted thanks to the city zoning ordinance that requires that trees get planted whenever there's a new development, or theoretically anyway, when a parking lot gets resurfaced. That's another main way we add trees to our canopy. Other little bits and pieces and ways that happen, that trees get planted through some of our partners like Groundwork, WRWC and others. But so this is sort of how we currently are planting trees, the tools we have in our toolbox. And then the other key thing with trees is maintaining them. Everybody loves to plant a tree or come out for a photo op to plant a tree. Not everybody always thinks about all of the work that goes into keeping those trees alive And it's the big, mature, old, wise trees that also give us all of the ecosystem benefits we need. And so we are lucky, again, that we do have some dedicated funding streams in the city for keeping those trees alive and maintained, the public property trees anyway. And Doug has been able to, thanks to that, do some really strategic new ways of maintaining those trees, and block pruning is one. I don't know if, Doug, there's anything you want to, I should have said that. Doug and Candace, feel free to chime in at any point as I am walking through this. But
Essentially, it's the first time that we've instituted systematic pruning of our trees. So we work down the blocks in 10% of our city, ward by ward, each year, and we're in year 4 of our 10-year rotation. So, and we found that we can prune twice as many trees doing it systematically rather than just reactionary filling service request type of pruning, which we still do.
it also is a key step towards having an equitable approach to maintenance of trees, because it means we know we're hitting everywhere and not responding to the squeakiest wheel or that type of method. And so we also have some other small kind of pilot Providence Community Tree Keepers program, where this middle picture is some of the amazing groundwork green team youth, our first youth tree keepers who are residents, get trained in structural pruning of young trees and get a badge and can go and prune around the city. So those are some of the things we currently are doing to keep our trees healthy. The other thing that is happening right now that it's just useful to mention as a sort of bigger picture context that some of this work fits into is that the state of Rhode Island recently picked urban reforestation, really wisely realized that most of Rhode Island is one urban forest, and identified urban forest and reforestation as the key way that our state can address climate mitigation and adaptation. And so they have gotten a grant to do some work with a number of national partners, US Forest Service and American Forests, which is a sort of tree nonprofit nationally. And Molly Henry is a climate fellow working based in DEM, who is helping lead this sort of couple-year initiative to develop tools that will help our cities and towns in Rhode Island, and then the ideas that around the country, really bring a health equity and a climate resilience lens to urban forest management and planning. So we have been involved with that, and they're doing some interesting work and creating some tools that hopefully we will all get to start using, and that we will be piloting some of those in Providence as we work on this BPD tree plan process. So that's happening, and it's pretty cool. So just a quick minute to talk about data. It is, one of the things, knowing what we have is a key first step to then being able to, that tells us, even though we know anecdotally and experientially that there are neighborhoods with less tree cover, we feel it. When we see where we have trees and where we don't have trees, where we have all sorts of different metrics about our urban forest species breakdown, that lets us then really proactively manage our urban forest for the outcomes we want. So Doug, do you want to talk just a little bit about some of what you've done with the data inventory, UTC, give a little overview of that stuff?
Well, we did a comprehensive street tree inventory in 2017 with 50 volunteers and 5 paid staff. And we walked the streets and counted and identified and measured all of the curbside trees in the city. And this was the second time that it's happened. We've done this since I've been here. And so we were able to compare data with the 2006 street tree inventory. And what we found is we had that the PNPP has been very successful. We've had nearly a 10% increase in our street trees since 2006, which is a really positive sign. And that was a 10% increase on top of the previous inventory in 1988. And we found that our tree diversity is expanding, and that we still are analyzing the data, but there isn't an even distribution of street trees across the city, but some neighborhoods have really made a difference since 2006. So the map on the screen now is not the street tree inventory. These are, this is showing canopy cover. So we also did a urban tree canopy study of the entire city, the entire urban forest, which includes private lands and parks and natural areas, and determine how much, and so this is using flyover imagery and GIS mapping, and how much of the city's acreage is covered with canopy when viewed from above. And it's a baseline data that we did once before in 2007. So we were able to compare. 2007, we had just over 23% canopy cover in Providence. That's the map on the left. You can see that the darkest areas are the neighborhoods that have the highest percentage canopy cover, and the lighter neighborhoods have the lowest. And so you can see that we found that it's not evenly distributed. In 2018, we did this again using the same methodology developed by the Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab at University of Vermont in collaboration with the Forest Service. And this is paid for by the Helen Walker Raleigh Tree Care Trust Fund. Again, we're so lucky to have them. And you can see it. This map is not broken down by neighborhood, but it shows sort of a finer look where the tree canopy is. It's similar to 2007 with some changes and some more granular look that we're still trying to figure out. We haven't gotten the final report yet, so we're eager to do some more comparison and see where the canopy is growing and where it's sometimes shrinking.
So yeah, one of the things that we have known, again, as I said, we know it experientially from moving around the city and feeling different temperatures and observing things as humans. We know it from our previous inventories and UTC studies, and we know it still from what we're seeing so far of the previews of our current updated studies, is that, and this is true in Providence and in basically every other city in the country, that the tree canopy cover corresponds pretty dramatically and distinctly to a lot of other socioeconomic and racial justice metrics. We know with low income, as Doug mentioned, correspond to low canopy, low home ownership rates, communities of color. We know there are a lot of really key health and environmental mappable impacts like asthma rates, heat island effect. We know these things. We've known them for a while, we still know them. It's good to look at them together. But so this is sort of a key framework and knowledge base that has led us to this PVD tree plan work more concretely. The other thing we know, as I think most of you know, is that climate change is real. It's here and it's real. And we also know that urban forests are and can be a really potent, powerful tool in addressing, in helping us both mitigate and adapt to, both kind of address some of these climate change, stop, slow, halt some of these processes, and also adapt to them in ways that keep us as healthy and safe as we can be. And so, you know, some of the key ways, probably most of you know, trees remove air pollution, they cool our buildings, they capture CO2, they cool us off in the summer. One of the really dramatic way, this is one of the Department of Health, Rachel Calabro's slides, but in Rhode Island, we are already seeing and are going to continue to see extreme heat days and extreme weather events, more rainfall days with more concentrated rainfall and targeted flooding. So we are already seeing and are going to continue to see these climate change impacts in Rhode Island. We know also that those impacts are felt differently by different communities in our city. And we know about the climate justice and climate equity moment of this. And so bringing that equitable urban forest lens to this climate justice lens is something that we're also engaging with. So we started, well, years ago, PNPP and Doug and a couple other people who work sort of, you know, directly on tree planting stuff were like, all right, we have a few of these great tools. We have the PNPP planting, neighborhood planting model. That's one great tool. It's not enough. You know, we have no way of planting on private property, of resourcing, you know, residents, getting them free trees. Like we know there's so much more we can do and need to do. So we sat down and started to have some strategic planning sessions. And we realized really quickly that all of these questions, like where and how do we need to be planting and what are the policies we really need, these are much bigger questions than certainly PNPP or any small group should be answering. These are questions for us as a city and us as a community to answer. And so we also learned that there is something called an urban forest master plan that has gotten more popular in the last decade or so with in different cities. And it's not just a management plan, like here's how we prune and maintain the trees. It's really this bigger picture strategic vision. And so we spent a while doing I did a deep dive into other cities and how other cities had done that and had a few really key takeaways. And one was that everybody who seemed to have a successful plan emphasized that the collaboration and collective ownership help, you know, having a plan where you have a consultant come in and write your plan and you get some input and you guys say, everyone says cool and we adopt it and it sits on the shelf is less useful than a plan where we are all coming together and slowly and messily hashing out these issues and coming up with a solution. So we know that, surprise, surprise, but it was good to see that other cities found that true too. And also that really doing this planning work in cities was what was building the foundation and the partnerships to then address those urban forest challenges, like, you know, to build the partnerships and the strategies necessary. And we also knew, because we knew that we were bringing an equity lens to this from the beginning. That was our goal. And we were seeing some cities who had done urban forest master plans and then had come back and realized like, oh, well, we didn't really tackle that, you know, our cities still aren't. And so they were going back and doing like tree equity plan updates. And we were like, we know that we wanted to build this in from the get-go. So, and there were a few cities that were particularly useful models in that best practices. And we spent a lot of time talking with various people about what they've done, learning from them. And we also are incredibly lucky because we get to build off of the work of the Climate Justice Plan here and the incredible work of the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee and use that framework that is just a powerful tool. So we're very excited to have that resource to build off of as well. And so all of these things I sort of talked through are what led us to, all right, we need to create a PVD tree plan. That's what we're calling this, our vision here in this city. And we had sort of assembled some of the people who were directly already engaged with urban forests, you know, the people who are already thinking about these things and have been moving us forward. These are some of those folks. We then put out 2 RFPs. We knew we wanted to have outside expertise from both somebody with the real technical urban forest planning lens and then real expertise in equitable community engagement. And so we put out 2 RFPs for those 2 different consultants. And let me go forward, am I frozen? Hold on. Oh, there we go. first. So we, a couple months ago, everything has been slowed down by COVID, of course, but we contracted to work with Youth in Action as the community equity and engagement consultant team, and that they themselves are working as a collaborative team made up of Youth in Action, Movement Education Outdoors, and Monica Huertas, who many of you probably know all those folks, but so they are collectively working to help on developing, ensuring equity is brought into every phase of this process and in doing some of the actual engagement. And then Save a Tree Consulting Group is going to be bringing some of that kind of technical urban forest best practices and resources to bear. So a few of the just sort of approach and goals that we have articulated so far for ourselves. Centering frontline communities of color, particularly youth in those communities, throughout the process. Thinking really broadly about what an urban forest plan means. Yes, it's trees, but the urban forest is all of the trees. This reminds me, I have to get in the habit every time we talk, I want to start off by defining an urban forest, because I think we use that term and don't always, we take for granted that people know what we're talking about. But really to us, that is every tree that grows, the weed tree that grows up the chain link fence, the stately tree in the park, the tree in your backyard, all together. That is all the urban forest, and all of the things that are growing under it are part of it. And we are inhabitants of the urban forest, along with the squirrels and the rats. And
it really does look like a forest from above, from, Google, Earth or whatever. Those interconnected canopies when it's working well. And sometimes we have individual trees too.
So thinking broadly about that, right? Like trees, it isn't just the tree on the street and how we manage it. It is these things tied to, we've already seen and talked about in some of those maps earlier, health, public health for sure, pollution, so industrial hazards, energy burden, cooling, heating bills, climate, displacement and housing, who gets to own land to plant a tree on, who is dealing with issues of displacement and green gentrification and creativity in trees. What does it mean for trees as a community network in place, and how do we express ourselves through and with trees? So all of these things, a broad conception of planning for urban forest. And then also the real nerdy data stuff, really looking at some of those data sets from those different threads and how those factor in and how they map into and against our tree data and maps, and looking at some of the opportunities, threats, challenges from a data side, and then also building in pilot initiatives and doing things. Quick wins, actual, get out there and try this thing that we wondered about, this model for planting trees in X type of place. And then another sort of goal out of this project will be for us all to really come to recognize collectively that the urban forest is an asset that we have. It is an infrastructure that appreciates as soon as we install it, unlike most other types of infrastructure that just start depreciating. So how do we foster buy-in and commitment to an equitable urban forest too? Why should I care not just about the tree on my street, but about the trees throughout the city, because it is an ecosystem and I'm an inhabitant of that ecosystem. So building that awareness collectively is another goal of this. So that's all, just a couple goals. So we have just a little bit about how we've been structuring this. Right now, this is all we've just sort of had this last week, our first convening meeting with our consultants and the start of some of the project team. A lot, because so much of this is about waiting and getting community input and engagement and really working on kind of collaborative governance models. None of this is set in stone, but the sort of framework we've been working on is a steering committee, community advisory group most likely will emerge that will be guiding, overseeing the process. We right now have envisioned these sort of two realms, the community engagement out and about, talking with people, with groups, surveys, events, planting initiatives, who knows what, street ambassadors, and then the sort of data research and working group, and really looking at some of that nitty gritty about maps and data and sort of different health and climate and urban forest data, but then also making sure that those overlap and talk to each other. And how do we figure out how to, you know, help us all understand some of that data stuff? How do we, what's important for us to try to really grapple with and tease out. So this is our sort of org chart draft, but
and how that matches up with policy as well.
Yeah, exactly. Policy, funding. And so then we also have just spent a little time identifying who are the stakeholders, who are the people we hope to engage. And again, working off of a lot of the framework from the a template that the Racial and Environmental Justice Committee was using to really think about our priority engagement stakeholders. We have spent some time thinking about how we intentionally really are reaching out to ensure that folks are guiding this process who have the frontline lived experience of a low canopy neighborhood where it's 20 degrees hotter on a hot summer day than it is in a high canopy neighborhood. And so centering that work in the engagement process. And the, sorry, I keep freezing up. The other project stakeholders who it will be really important to bring to the table are a lot of the groups who are actively currently working or bumping up against or interacting with the urban forest, or kind of pieces of it or policy elements of it. So public works and transportation, planning, PHA, DEM, utility companies, tree care companies, and then people who own large tracts of land that do or don't have trees on them. And then a lot of the groups and coalitions and nonprofits who are working on these issues already, many of you in your work, planting trees or working on other greening initiatives, sustainability initiatives, transit, educators, and then also educational partners at all levels, youth, elementary school, after school, formal, informal, but really bringing those people into the conversation, and funders always, of course, because we're gonna need their money to do this. And so just wanted to highlight a couple of the examples of some sort of pilot things we've done. Actually, Candace, you've led most of these. Do you want to just speak quickly about a sample pilot initiative that we've been doing that's the kind of thing? Watering?
Yeah, sure. I think Cassie touched on this a little bit, but there are a lot of areas where we really need to be planting, and the sort of standard PNPP planting and stewardship model doesn't really work that well, where we just plant a tree in front of a home and the resident or homeowner agrees to care for those trees. So for instance, you can see on picture all the way to the left, that's Mary Fogarty Elementary School in South Providence, and really wanted to plant trees all around the school, but especially in the summer when those trees would really need a lot of stewardship and watering, there would be no one around to care for them. So we worked with Amelia and the Groundwork Youth Green Team for them to spend one day of their work week watering trees. You can see them here. They had a bike trailer where they put a rain barrel on top, and then they would fill buckets that had holes in the bottom with water from the rain barrel, and leave them along outside of each tree. And I think they stewarded maybe over 20 trees around the school and in front of nearby homes. And then they were trained as tree keepers, and now they know how to prune trees too. So it's been a great way to, on a small scale, figure out ways where we can get community groups and youth groups to care for trees that wouldn't otherwise have stewardship through PNPP's normal model.
And that's just an example of that's one thing we already had sort of had pulled together in the last year because it was a need we knew, and but it's the example of something that I think we can really feed into this planning process. Other things like this, who knows? Already things in the works to do a tree-related musical with Joanne Ayuso's talking. So like, I think there'll be a lot of concrete things that we hope to do that will tie to tree planting or activities that feed this planning work. So quick timeline overview is that we, again, this was very intentional, was wanting this, knowing that this should take a long time. This is very ambitious. We're trying to do a lot here, encompass a lot, and we want it to take, have time to really be building valuable processes and relationships and programs. And so we're this is an estimate, everything has been constantly in flux. But about at least a year and a half to 2 years or more to do this work. And this is sort of a very broad strokes outline of the phases. And where we are right now just launching, even though it feels like we've been working and talking about this PVD tree plan for a couple of years, because we have, and trying to find funding for it and the pre-planning, we are just starting the sort of alignment and orientation phase and starting to talk about it to other folks out there, like you all, who we know will be key partners on this. So this was just a list that I had thrown together, I don't remember for what, but of some of the things that there are all these things we're talking about in various meetings or with people or with, residents and neighbors, but all the things that we want to tackle on this list could be 5 times as long and will get longer, but just some of the types of things that we know and hope will come up in this work. How do we access the fire hydrants for the youth community stewardship to water street trees? How do we, where do we put urban orchards and food forests? Workforce development, jobs training as a key thread through this. So many different, this is a start, and we hope to keep crowdsourcing and iterating this. So I think that's the spiel on the PVD tree plan. Unless Doug, or Candace, anything I totally left out?
That was a great half an hour introduction. Great job.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
So yeah, I don't know if folks have questions or how much, if we've taken up a lot of your busy packed agenda, but oops.
Oh, this was great. Thank you guys so much. And I think we have like 10 or 12 or so minutes for questions. If anyone around the table has some, don't be shy. I have a million, but I'll hold off till others.
Can I start?
Carlos, you jumping in.
Sure. Hi. First of all, thank you for this presentation. It was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I have a personal interest in urban ecology, personal and research interest in urban ecology, even though I'm looking more at the animal side of all that, but they go together, with the ecosystem, plants and animals. So maybe at some point we can talk more, because I have an interest in, in looking at city residents' variations in attitudes and values towards, the so to speak, reforesting of the city, that is gonna come with some species, etc. But anyway, the other question that I had, I don't know if there's an observation with a question. Well, one observation that I've seen in kind of like public policy towards open spaces, and I don't know if it's inequality or if it accurately assesses what people want or what, but the observation has been that in more affluent neighborhoods, open areas are planned more or relatively more towards like passive recreation and uses that are more amenable to having more trees. Whereas in less affluent areas, open areas are more geared towards, and again, this is relatively more, but this is just an observation. Maybe it can be quantified, but there's a more focus on like making sports complexes, you know? And of course, I mean, I myself, I'm big into sports. I practice sports and they're very important for me. However, I always feel that there might be some assumptions there that might have been untested about what the communities who are less affluent want versus what they're getting. You know, if you see a less affluent community or community of color, right away you're thinking, oh, they want more basketball courts or more soccer fields or what, you know, what not. Whereas a more affluent community, you might think, oh, they want more passive recreation with more trees. I don't know. I think this is an assumption that should be tested if it hasn't been for the planning of the city, you know, because I think an automatic decision is made. And for example, the area around I used to live in Mount Pleasant. Right now I'm in Elmhurst. I only moved like half a mile, but anyway, right next to where I used to live, there was the open area around the Mount Pleasant High School. And well, in the time that I was there for 10 years, I saw it go from a passive recreation area to now it's a sports complex. And my observation, because I still go there, is that less people use it now. And these were by and large majority, you know, people of color of Providence, you know. And when it was a more of an open area, more people were using it. And there was a mix of sports and passive recreation. Now it's really only sports, and you know, a few people go there and walk their dogs. But again, I think there was a net. My observation is that there was a net decrease in use of the open area and a net decrease of tree cover because some big trees were taken down. You know, so I don't know. Is there a question? Did I ask a question? I don't know, but I think there might be some questions in there. You know, or some comments that you can illuminate us about, or you know.
I think it's a great point, and something to look at. And I think that speaks to the value of the community engagement part of our project, to hear what people have to say in these communities, what they value the most. I'm sure there's some of both, but not at the expense of healthy air and cleaner water and all of that sort of thing. Even in Roger Williams Park, which just recently we had, the new person in charge of the tennis courts was asking if he could take 4 probably 100-year-old oak trees down so they could put a dome up over the tennis courts. And I had to say no, and he had a hard time understanding the passive recreation need for these trees and why they're so important to the character of the park. But he had points as well that people need places to play year round and all that. So I think it's a fascinating point. It's something that we need to really dig into more.
And I think when we do get some of this data, we've gotten little snapshots, but when we get some of the data about our tree canopy currently, it is pretty rich, and we will be able to really look even at a parcel level at sort of land use and tree canopy and zoning and tree canopy. And I think that in combination with really going out at a neighborhood by neighborhood level and determining what people really want and how and it isn't always, the answer isn't always a tree, I think our goal is very much not to go out and say the most trees everywhere, no matter what. Like, there are times where trees are at conflict with other needs of a community, and that is critical for us to understand. So I think those are really great questions. And in terms of just reach particular, we will hope to have a sort of very soon just like a Google form spot where people who want to stay in the loop or get involved can fill out. But in the meantime, maybe Sue, you could share a contact info afterwards, but please reach out, particularly if there's a particular, research project thing that might fit into something. We could talk. So reach out to us.
Excellent.
I can do an email intro with you guys. Yeah. You'll probably be really interested in Carlos's research as well, like the animals in the city, if we think about it as a whole forest. Any other questions from task force members? You're all being unusually quiet. Um, I do see that we do actually have 2 hands from the public. So if there aren't any task force members with questions, maybe we could unmute Maria first and then Judy.
Maria, you're all set to speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. I just want to follow up on Carlos's point. I live in the Mount Pleasant, I straddle 2 neighborhoods, Mount Pleasant and the Upper South Side. And I can relate to Carlos's comment about the lack of accessibility to the Mount Pleasant area. I was one who used to all the time go walk around there, take my kids when they were younger and everything else. And now I can't get in through the gated areas. So yes, I'm just acknowledging your statement and saying that that is a concern and so forth. And on straddling South Side, because that's my neighborhood where I grew up and where I spend a lot of time, and my family's still there. I have a lot of interest, and that's part of the reason, motivation why I'm attending this meeting, trying to figure out what we can do for that area to get more tree canopy. But at the same time, the house that I grew up in, one of the issues, sort of the tree root conflict that I saw here on your list, because we just had Roto-Rooter spend a considerable amount of time clearing the sewer lines, going into the toilet, and it's a 6-month issue all the time. So I want to try to figure out how do we balance all of that, because there's financially there's consequences to that and otherwise. And what do we do to mitigate that? Because there's the sewer lines plus the sidewalk heaving, and we're trying to figure out who within the city do we contact to both clear the sewer lines so we don't have this issue, but also preserve the trees.
Those are very good issues to bring up, and we have trees that were planted in the past in very small spaces, and somehow they survived and won out in the conflict with the surrounding infrastructure and then heaved it. So good planting design is critical, I think, in alleviating long-term effects of sidewalk heaving, giving trees more room to grow, larger spaces, and sometimes, you know, not choosing particular species of trees in narrow sidewalks. There are some streets that are and sidewalks that are quite old and narrow in Providence that perhaps shouldn't have trees on them. You know, I hate to say it, we want trees everywhere, but we don't, you know, want the conflicts, and we want positive feelings about the trees, and we don't want to cause issues for people. And so we have many existing trees, like sounds like you had one was heaving a sidewalk, I think that you said.
Yes,
so
considerably.
There are ways, you know, we work with Public Works. It's a case-by-case basis sort of thing to determine, can a new sidewalk fix help by giving the tree more space to grow, or is there, you know, it sort of depends on the tree and how large it is and its condition and what we do. Sometimes, you know, as a last resort, we do remove trees for that reason. But we try and use some of our, you know, innovative technology that other places are using. We're just starting to use here to, you know, maybe it's not the perfect concrete sidewalk everywhere. Maybe we'll use a different material over where the roots are in order to preserve a lovely tree. The sewer issue is, you know, the bane of my existence, really, and it's much worse, I would say, for homeowners who have to deal with it. But the sewer lines are old, and they're made of clay components held together with mortar joints. And over time, those mortar joints wear away. These lines are 9 feet down below the surface. And roots are generally in the top, say, 2 feet of soil. But when that nutrient-rich water starts to leak out and fills, then the roots will, you know, eventually grow down, find the line, grow into the line, and make the situation worse. So it's not all the tree's fault, but I understand the issue, and again, that's a case-by-case basis too. And we'd love to through this planning process, come up with some innovative ways to maybe help homeowners, especially people who can't afford a $10,000 sewer line fix, on how to
Yeah.
replace lines or do other types of fixes, maybe lining the sewer line with something else in order to save trees. And then sometimes we got to remove the tree.
We want to save the tree. We want to save the tree, but we also don't want to have the monthly bills calling Roto-Rooter and everything else. So should I follow up with you, Doug?
Yes, yeah, you can follow up with me. I'll send my tree inspector.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for the
No,
work
we'll
you're
help
doing.
you.
And Maria, thank you so much for raising, like, sometimes I joke that this is really just should be like a sewer plan. We should just call it what it is. It's a sewer plan that we're talking about. But on that specific instance, talk to Doug, but there were so many instances that, you know, you're not alone. I know, you know, it's a real thing. And so we really need to think about, right, what are the resources we need to, that shouldn't be the choice. Like, okay, do I get a tree, or do I have to have money to put to putting roto-rooting, like that shouldn't be a choice. So how do we come up with the tools?
We're caring for several trees on the streets that we'll put in, and we're caring for the others who are not caring for it. So we want the trees, but we also need to be able to live with the trees.
Yeah. Send me an email, Maria. If you're in South Providence, we should talk. We should talk about community stewardship models we have in South Providence.
Okay, perfect. I will follow up. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Can we take Judy off, or Judith Plotz off mute, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. I have a question, which is, have you reached out at all to absentee landlords? Because in areas with not too many trees, it would be of great benefit both to the landlord and the residents to foster the growth of trees. And if you could reach out to the landlords and point out to them what a value it would be to them, you might be able to set up some incentives for landlords and tenants to work together. So for landlords to provide the water for no extra cost, for the tenants to do the watering. And I don't know what other efforts could be built in, but that's a constituency that could be powerful and should be called upon to help.
Hi, Judith, and totally, Judith is one of our community tree keepers also out there pruning young street trees. We have come up with ways to sort of like twist and reconfigure our current programs to better deal with the realities of absentee. Often we have someone who wants a street tree and was willing to steward it, but it's owned by a holding company in Idaho or whatever. And so we've figured out ways to work around in our current program, but I think that really needs to be a policy, part of the looking at what are the policies, incentives, carrot sticks conversations to have property owners be part of this, and
different sign-off
tenants and residents too.
I'd like to ask another question, and that is, when you decide where to plant trees, I would expect that the trees would help each other. If there are more trees on the street, it will bring down the temperatures. They'll be more able to thrive.
That's absolutely true. And I think we should ask Candace to speak to that, because she had this great observation recently.
Oh, we were talking about outside District Hall.
Scorched trees.
Yeah, so you can see, if people know the new District Hall building in the Jewelry District, they have this like courtyard area. It's not concrete, but some kind of like paving stone area, but completely paved over. And during the summer, when there were still, probably can't see it anymore, but when there were still leaves on the trees, and it's two rows of trees on multiple edges of this courtyard, and you can see the side of the tree that was facing another tree was green throughout the summer, and the other side of the tree, like exactly split in half, the other side of the tree that was facing paved area and didn't have a tree on that side of it was completely scorched, crunchy brown leaves.
Very interesting.
See, the tree was like basically split dead center. Yeah, so definitely trees like being near other trees.
They buffer each other. They provide windbreaks for each other. Sort of create more of a microclimate on a street. It's very localized. So a solitary tree on a street has a tougher life and has to deal with higher temperatures and heat and drought more than a street that has a lot of trees on it.
And one thing I didn't mention, but another kind of a data set, this summer, the State DM Forestry Division with volunteers around Providence, East Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Cranston did a heat mapping, heat watch survey where we went out with air sensor. In the past, we've had like used surface temperature estimates, but we went out with in cars at various points during the day and drove these routes around the city and mapped at like 6 a.m. and noon and 3 p.m. and midnight, the air temperature, and that's being analyzed. And we know that it gets hotter in certain parts of the city, but this will let us really look at what is it that's most mitigating the urban heat island effect in our city, where are the places we most really need to target, what's working, what's not. So we'll have that data soon to be able to weave in. But that's one of our biggest things in Providence. I think the heat island impact and knowing that people in our low canopy neighborhoods have the least access to air conditioner or money to keep air conditioner running when it's most needed, or cooling centers in COVID, the heat piece is huge.
I think that that data analysis is done. I can share.
Yeah, right, it just came out.
Awesome. So if there are no other questions around the table, any other questions? Totally cool if there are. Yeah, Amelia.
I think Linda Perry's hand is also up in the participant or in the attendees list, but my question was just about, I know it's a tree plan, but we talked about sewers. I was wondering if part of the community engagement is going to be any conversations kind of related to sustainable funding, like a stormwater utility or something that could fund green, not just trees, but other green space investments. And then the other question was around green space investments and not, like kind of in the right of way where there's a lot of opportunity for retrofitting urban neighborhoods, not necessarily always having a space for trees, but just like depaving and putting in grass, or is that good? Are any of those kinds of conversations, or do you foresee any of those types of things coming up? Will you like compile all of that kind of information in your ultimate plan and kind of have a section that's like not about trees in your tree plan?
I say yes, because even if it's not, planning our urban forest and where trees go is as much about where they don't go or can't go. And so what else do we do there? And what other, we're not just tree people who, if tree's not the solution, we don't care, so if it's not a tree, does a bioswale, and I didn't mention, but in the pilot, we've been working with Amelia and Groundwork to figure out how we can incorporate trees into bioswales or not, or where you do one or the other. So yes, and yes, I think, and on the funding, stable revenue stream, that's something folks who are involved currently with the tree plan, like Sheila Dormady, who couldn't be here today, but have spent a lot of time with a lot of you all trying to crack that nut. But the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, as part of the state work, is also really, they're working right now on doing a sort of report on some of the potential revenue streams for this work. And it's this work being trees, but also, but not just that broader picture. And so that is going to be helpful for us to use and look at and see what will be relevant in Providence, policy and funding, whether that's stormwater or what else.
Awesome. And thanks, Amelia, for pointing out that Linda has a question. Normally, when people have a hand raise, it goes to the top of my list, but it did not do that. So I didn't see that. Are we able to take Linda off for her question, please? Off mute.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Amelia and Sue for this, and Cassie and Doug and everybody. I have a couple of questions. I'll try and streamline it. Carlos, first of all, I want to say his comment was right on the mark. It was very interesting, and I appreciated that perspective. We do have a lot of wildlife here. I was just talking to a friend who had a crazy raccoon kill his chickens in the city of Providence, where we're doing a tree planting next week, actually. Doug and Cassie, about a review of the tree ordinance in the city. I know that Doug is instrumental project there. You know, he has to approve the tree plan for, say, a parking lot. Is it possible that the ordinance for the zoning ordinance for parking lots could be amended? Maybe add more trees in the islands? Like some parking lots only have trees around the edges, some parking lot there's trees in. Is that something that you would consider initiating and pushing the envelope a little bit on that? And something to think about. And because Washington Park is the frontline community and it's always the hottest, the least amount of trees, are you looking to do something more aggressive in, say, those areas than the other areas that don't need it as much? And also, Amelia and Cassie and Doug, everybody's aware of the curbing issue that we have in Washington Park and how we're trying to create curbing so we can plant in our hottest red line area in the city. And well, there's so many other things, but I won't keep you. So just those two, the parking lot zoning, the rezoning, and the frontline low canopy special initiative. That would be it. And I will lower my hands now.
I'll take the zoning question.
Yeah.
So the zoning ordinance instituted tree and landscape requirements for developers in 2004, and it actually was revised in 2013 to increase the number of trees and provide islands. There's supposed to be an island for every 10 spaces in a parking lot. In addition to a 5-foot strip with trees planted in them, 25 feet on center, and a few other things in that ordinance. And so that kicks in when they're looking for a certificate of occupancy or looking for a permit. And then we do have a problem here where some parking lots get repaved and they skip the permit process and they just do it. And there's things to look at in terms of enforcement. But I'm glad to look at the zone. I think everything's on the table for this master plan. And one thing I'd love to look at is not necessarily more trees for parking lots, because it's pretty good now in terms of the number, but how can they be better? How can we get them to grow larger and live a long life in parking lots? Because it's a sad life for parking lot island trees sometimes. So I think we need to look at how can we create more rooting space, maybe under the pavement, or planting fewer trees, but in a larger area, so that tree gets as large as those 2 trees ever would if they ever got to reach maturity in the same space, you know what I'm saying? So I'd like to look at planting specs or requirements, possibly in the zoning ordinance. You brought up another great point, an issue just with infrastructure in Washington Park, which is that some of the streets don't have curbs. And you need a curb to put a tree in because it holds the soil, and the soil, you know, that water flows into the soil and the soil washes away, and you can't plant a tree unless there's a curb. And so there's this first step, which is very frustrating, and Linda's been really persistent on this. How can the city needs to invest in better curbing and planting spaces and infrastructure, and then we can get the trees, or we plan them hand in hand. So that's going to come into play too.
And
I think I'm still unmuted. Can I jump in here?
Yeah, go
You know, my council, excuse me?
I was saying go for it. Yeah, please.
Thank you. You know, my council person is paving some of the roads because we've been kind of neglected here, and there's a lot of bad roads. And when they're paving a road, I think we should consider using the cement logs and trying to get the money to, I mean, why do it twice? That's the thing. I mean, if they're going to put in a water line, you know, why pave the road twice and have to dig it up? That's always been, you know, a point of contention. But if we're going to have a plan to improve the neighborhood, which Pedro is doing, and I'd like to see some coordination with that and put the curbing in at the same time. I mean, it makes sense to do that if it's at all possible. And I appreciate you guys supporting this initiative, because I've lived here for 40 years and I've seen the dirt go to the street, and I've seen some people put in their own makeshift curbing and put in a tree and hope it doesn't get killed by the snowplow. And all of a sudden the light bulb went off. It's like, wow, we'll never afford a granite curb, but let's do something that is affordable and it will be able to preserve the life of the tree. And, you know, and then the other thing is there a way to kind of mandate a canopy rather than having to ask? I mean, your idea of getting Johnson & Wales involved is a good one, because a lot of their students live in non-owner occupied homes, investors, boarding houses. And these people, they don't care if they have a tree or not, but I could probably get Johnson & Wales to say, you know, this is part of our good community outreach initiative, you know, and to make the neighborhood cleaner and greener and cooler. I mean, that is a possibility also, but can we just sort of work on not having to ask? Is that possible? You know, I mean, that's one of the things. And because we're such a hot community, you know, we're going to rely on AC and, you know, the community aggregation, the community choice aggregation idea here in Washington Park is kind of all tied together. It's all interconnected. You know, if it really is interconnected. So without babbling on too much, I just wanted to put that out there because trees and solar, and to reduce the cost of energy and make life more pleasant in the Red Line District, which is the new name for the heat island here, the Red Line District. Thank you.
yeah, I think Linda, everything you're raising are like, they're exactly the questions and challenges that we need to dig into and tackle. At reviewing the ordinance and zoning stuff, but then also looking at, okay, we have those in place now, what is not, what's the gap between getting that to actually happen? So is it, you know, resources directed to small business owners? Is it, you know, just making sure people even know that that's a thing? So I think looking at all of that, teasing it apart, and then talking to people, you know, the business owners or the residents, and finding out what's happening out in the neighborhoods. And to answer your question about where we will be focusing pilot initiatives, I think absolutely that will already just have, the places we're doing community stewardship models, or, bike watering, or a lot of the bioswale work are in our low tree canopy neighborhood. So yes, and that will continue to be the case. And as soon as planting season is over in the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna talk more about curbing strategies as a pilot initiative for Washington Park. But I think that's an example of the kind of bigger picture stuff we need to tackle.
Thank you, Cassie. And I'd like to involve Johnson and Wales in this process, in the tree planting, because they have a list of all their landlords. And, they're not adding anything much to the value of our community except higher real estate prices. So might as well have them pay for the trees and bring it all down, bring the temperature down in a few years.
Yeah, we need all folks at the table, some to listen to and let lead, and some to demand things from. And yeah, a lot of different types of input we need from people.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for this really amazing presentation. If there's anything you want me to share with task force members or the public afterward, like we have a list of folks who get the reminder emails and stuff, just send it my way. Cassie, you have my email addresses, and yeah, and I'll make sure that gets sent out. But really appreciate you guys presenting today. And I still have a million questions that I'm probably just gonna like pepper Sheila with, but I might also follow up with you guys.
Well, we're just getting started. This is all lies ahead, and we really invite you all to plug in and be part of it. And we'll more soon. We're just getting going. But.
Awesome. And if there are ways for us to be helpful in the future, please come back.
Yeah, to come back with updates or requests, or to this group. Sure.
Yeah. Realizing. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, Doug and Candace, it's also great to meet you guys. Yeah, Donna.
So can we have that PowerPoint sent to us? We'll add it to the record. That would be
great. Thank you. Yeah, Cassie, if you can send it to
okay.
Donna.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Will do.
And realizing we're running a little over time, I'm going to streamline our next thing and just ask Catherine if you could give us an update on the film screening idea, and then we might hold the rest for our next meeting. So we'll go over next meeting. Catherine.
Yeah, hi. So I've been in touch with Lintoria Newton, who is one of the producers of the Mossville Project film, which is a film about a community in Louisiana that was originally formed by formerly enslaved folks, and now it's unfortunately been taken over by like a petrochemical company. So they want to do an impact screening with us, and they want to involve community groups that aren't necessarily environmentally focused, as well as environmentally focused groups. So the only real question that I have that I'm hoping that maybe Donna or Angela could answer is about the city's Zoom link, because the Mossville folks have like a basic subscription, and they were going to have some costs associated with doing the screening to like a larger portion of the public. And I didn't promise anything, but I just wanted to ask about if whether or not we could use maybe our Zoom link to be able to host like a panel that has some producers on it and some environmental group leaders from the city on it, and have the public be able to watch that, to take any costs off the table for the producers of the film. But I didn't know if that was a possibility, and I didn't promise anything, but I just wanted to kind of ask about that.
That might be a question I might need to speak with Sean with, so I can speak with Sean and then have him probably get back with you on that one.
Okay, great. I would appreciate that. Yeah, because they want to do the screening. They're very interested, and there would be no cost associated other than like using the Zoom if we could. Okay. So I'm hoping it's and I can also send around. There's a I can like email Sue, and Sue can email everybody a little trailer for the film. It unfortunately doesn't look like it has a happy ending, but it looks like it's a really good story of resilience and like fighting back against environmental racism and whatnot. So I think it might be a nice thing. It's very COVID safe. Obviously, it would be like a virtual, everybody would get a little link to watch it, and then we could do the panel where we hear from people involved in the film and then people doing local efforts here. So I think it would be a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, just send him a link and maybe CC Tina and myself, and then, we can discuss that and see where we can go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And let me know if you don't, if you need need any further assistance with Zoom, if the clerk's office doesn't work out, we might be able to do something on our side of things. Also, I watched that movie this past spring. It's a really powerful film. So thanks for taking the lead on that.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for taking the lead on that. And I think that would be an amazing thing for us to help bring that kind of panel discussion to Providence. It's an amazing film, and yeah, really appreciate you taking the lead on that. And I'll follow up with Sean, and if that doesn't work out, Leah, maybe you, me, and Catherine can put our heads together over Zoom. Okay, awesome. We are just about out of time. We've already heard from the public, so thank you for your awesome comments, Judy and Linda, and a lot of other folks have dropped off. So can I, are there any other updates on the table that are burning? Otherwise we can do a more in-depth, we can save more time for updates around the table at our next ESTF meeting, which, just to make sure everybody is remembering, is on Monday, November 23rd at 4 p.m. And it should be on all the task force members' calendars, but just saying it aloud for the recording. And that'll be noticed again by the clerk's office, as always, at least 48 hours in advance. Awesome. So unless there's any burning updates around the table,
I make a motion to adjourn.
is there a second to Amelia's motion?
Yeah, can I second that motion to adjourn?
Thanks. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Did anyone abstain?
I have to abstain, I just realized that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not a voting member.
You will be so soon. I'm gonna poke them. Awesome. Well, we are then adjourned, and a big thanks to Angela and Donna, and also to our guests, Candace, Cassie, and Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, that was great.